All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar on promoting conformance through automated processes. We're very excited to have everyone with us today, and really to have Rhonda Banks, who's the quality manager with ANAB, with us on this webinar to present the presentation for you. Before we get started and I hand it over to Rhonda, I do want to go through a couple of housekeeping items. Number one, we are recording this webinar, and so if you do want to watch it at a different time and watch it again, or even share it with somebody in your organization, it will be available on our website for you to access. Number two, if you have questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask away. We have some time at the very end of the webinar designated to be able to go through those questions, and so hopefully we'll be able to get through all of those for you today. There's actually a Q&A section of the Zoom meeting. Feel free to throw your questions in there, and we'll ask them towards the end of the presentation. So to introduce myself, my name is Karen Arriviaga, and I'm an account executive here at Qualtrics. We have a mixed bag of attendees on here today, so I do want to go through some basic information about Qualtrics for those of you on that have not actually heard of us or seen what our software can do prior to handing it over to Rhonda. So what Qualtrics is, we are all-in-one compliance management solution. We actually are going to give you all of the features that our product has to offer in one system, and we really pair that with our team commitment to our customers in the industries that they are serving. You know, we find that if we really take the time to understand the compliance burdens our customers are under, we can make sure that that's top of mind in the way that we add more product functionality to Qualtrics and how we service our customer base. We ourselves are an ISO 9001 organization. In fact, we went through our audit about a month ago. We're also celebrating our 25th anniversary. The way that Qualtrics got started 25 years ago was our parent company had to be ISO 9001. They started going through the process and realized it was a lot to manage, and there had to be a way to make it a little bit easier. Somebody started developing software to help manage some of those processes. The auditor came in and said, "This is great, you should sell it." And Qualtrics has been doing that ever since. Since we got started 25 years ago, we work with hundreds of organizations under all types of different accreditation burdens. We have about a 97% customer renewal rate, and if you are familiar with Virginia Tech, we are actually headquartered in Blacksburg, Virginia. When I say we're an all-in-one compliance management solution, these are really the core features of the product that we offer. Number one, document management, making sure all of your documents are in one location, easily accessible for all of your users, really controlling that full document lifecycle process from the time that the document is edited to the time that it is approved and published. Another part of our product, which we're really going to focus on today that you'll hear Rhonda talk about, is workflows. Workflows really pertain to automating different processes that you have in your organization. We also have a testing and training feature to track competency and awareness. And then all three of those sit on top of a reportable platform. So you have visibility into the data that is being collected. And so you can make sure that you are prepared for your audits. So like I mentioned, we're really going to be diving into workflows today. So well, first, what is a workflow? Workflows are automated processes that break down complex processes into step-by-step components. Significant time and money and resources and frustrations can actually be saved by automating some of these processes. Some of the real benefits include consistently managing processes across your organization, especially if there's multiple people involved in some of these processes. You also can increase efficiency and reduce time that you associate with some of these steps. You're really going to gain visibility into these processes by running reports and being able to see active and past data that you're collecting. With Qualtrics specifically, our workflows are very flexible, and we'll give you the tools and the templates to kind of get you started down the right path in creating some of these processes for your organization. We also offer our best-in-class workflows, which are ones that will come pre-populated in your instance of Qualtrics to really get you jump-started with the workflow functionality. Just to give you an idea of what workflows we're talking about and give you some examples to think about, this is just a quick list of some of our best-in-class workflows, and just give you some ideas of some of the processes that you can do within the system itself. If they are our best-in-class workflows, these will come pre-populated in your system, depending on what compliance burden you're under. And so we really dive in to see what is going to be appropriate for your organization. Now that we reviewed some of the basics of Qualtrics, I'm now going to introduce you to Rhonda and have her take over the screen. So Rhonda Banks, she is the quality manager for ANSI ASQ National Accreditation Board, or ANAB. Prior to her work with ANAB, Rhonda served as a quality manager for the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board, which merged with ANAB back in 2016. She was also the quality manager for the Oregon State Police Forensic Service Division Laboratory System. In her 20 years with the Oregon State Police, Rhonda also worked as a forensic analyst in drug chemistry, crime scene bloodstain pattern analysis, body fluid identification, and hair, paint, footwear, and tire track examinations. In her life prior to forensic science and accreditation body work, Rhonda was employed as a chemist in an environmental testing laboratory, performing a variety of EPA environmental test methods. Well, at this time, Rhonda, if you can hear me, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can take over.
Okay, we'll see how this goes.
And I can hear you?
Yeah, that's good. That's a good start. All right, well, Karen and her team do these all the time, I think, but it's not something that's part of my everyday. So welcome, everyone. I'm glad to be talking to you today. And thanks for the introduction, Karen. I want to start out, I know some of you are probably ANAB customers, but I want to start out by sharing a little bit with you about ANAB. The ANSI ASQ National Accreditation Board, ANAB, is the largest multidisciplinary accreditation body in North America. ANAB accredits both forensic and non-forensic calibration, testing, and laboratories and inspection bodies to 17025 and 17020. But we also do accreditation to a variety of other standards, which most people are less familiar with. So we accredit reference material producers, proficiency test providers, medical testing laboratories, and management system certification bodies as well. In addition, ANAB provides accreditation and/or audit services for a host of other federal, state, and industry-specific programs, which you might be familiar with. But you know, these slides are only so big, so you can't fit everything on there. So if you're interested in other programs, please feel free to visit our website at anab.org, and there's more information about other programs there. All right, so with that, I am excited to talk to you today about, sorry, a little bit of a snafu. I'm excited to talk to you today about how ANAB is using workflow portion of Qualtrics to help promote conformance with requirements in our own management system. So anyone who's been responsible for ensuring the conformance to a set of requirements has probably struggled with how to ensure those people who carry out the process on a day-to-day basis are consistently aware of the process steps and following all of those steps and keeping all of the records that you ultimately need to demonstrate conformance so that they're at your fingertips when you need them for an audit. So typically, at least in our management system and in other management systems that I have been a part of, this means that there is a controlled document and that document describes those procedure or process steps, and generally it would also then specify all of the required documentation that should be produced as a result. The problem is that then your conformance to these requirements is really then in someone else's hands. So someone either has to remember the process, or they have to be referencing the document directly while they're carrying out the process, and they have to follow it to the letter. And we all know that that doesn't always happen. And then when it doesn't happen, there's a risk for you of non-conformance. So what we end up with in those situations is one of those frustrating root cause analysis situations where you have a process in place and your process is a good process, but either it's not being consistently followed or it just isn't resulting in all of the required records being kept the way that you intended it to. So, and then things get even more complicated when you have a change in your process and you have people who've been performing that process for a long time, and now you have to ensure that they're trained on and consistently following these new changed processes and not just continuing to do things the same old way. So at ANAB, we find that the workflow portion of Qualtrics product is useful to us as a tool in helping us to define and control our processes and to ensure that we have all the records in place to demonstrate conformance and that those records are in a centralized location. And we also find that it helps to reduce our reliance on those controlled documents to govern our processes and ensure our conformance. So it's good to have options, and it's important to know your options. And there are several when it comes to workflow development. Qualtrics workflows are available pre-designed, as Karen discussed, and these can be used sort of in the out-of-the-box product. So this is kind of a plug-and-play option. If the process that was designed works for your organization, then these workflows can be just imported into your own Qualtrics system and used with minimal setup. This is a really great time-saving option if the process steps as designed work for you. You can also build your own custom workflows, which allows you to customize the steps of the workflow to your own unique internal process. This is the option that ANAB has chosen. We've chosen to customize workflows to our process rather than changing our process to adhere to a workflow that someone else designed. So there's also the option of a hybrid sort of solution, which is to take a pre-designed workflow that almost works for you, but may need some minimal customization to work for your organization. And this means that the majority of the development work is already done. So this is a really great time-saving option too, if there's something that's just almost what you need, but not quite. So you're probably thinking, that's really nice, Rhonda, but my business is totally different from yours. You're a real smooth talker, but I'm really not buying it. So although ANAB is an accreditation body, and you probably work for a laboratory or an inspection body or maybe even a certified organization, our management systems are probably not as different as you think. This is in large part due to the common elements used across the ISO standards, multiple. Incorporating a common structure and some basic elements into the ISO documents has been a big push in the recent years. So while our standards do serve different purposes, we all have requirements to address certain fundamental aspects in our management systems, and those requirements are largely the same. So for example, we all have to address impartiality, confidentiality, complaints, or appeals, or both. In our case, it's both. And we all have those management system requirements, which we can choose to fulfill either by option A or option B. There has also been a shift in the standards towards process-based requirements, and this is really noticeable in the new version of the 17025 laboratory standard, as well as in the new 17011 standard, which was just revised, and that's the standard that ANAB follows as an accrediting body. So where we used to see requirements for a procedure, we will often now see a requirement instead for a documented process. So the word procedure does imply something documented, and most often this has been interpreted as a controlled document. But it's important to realize that document and documented are not necessarily the same, and a document is just one way to achieve documentation. So this shift to a documented process is really significant for us, because what it does is it provides greater flexibility to us in how we choose to solve our problems within our own management systems and still maintain our conformance with our standards. So as we begin to think of our management systems as a set of processes, it becomes apparent that many of those processes are interrelated. I think when you look at this slide, it also becomes apparent that I am not a graphic artist, but we'll leave that discussion for a different day. So lucky for us, workflows can be related to one another as well and can further promote conformance by ensuring that one process is able to trigger another process when it's needed. There's a tool in Qualtrics called the Workflow Launcher that can do that, and allowing information generated in one process to be transferred to another process through a tool called the data copier, and also allowing reports to be generated in support of your processes and in support of your need for documentation. And those are available in the reporting part of Qualtrics. So for example, at ANAB, we realized that when we receive complaints that are about ANAB, we may need to initiate our corrective action and opportunity for improvement process. And we might also need information from the complaint process to become part of our management review, because that's one of the required inputs to the management review process. So the workflows for these various parts of our management system can be integrated with one another to ensure that the information is taken into consideration in all of the right processes so that we maintain our conformance. Okay, so I think that is the end of my slides, and I'm going to take you into the actual workflow to show you a little bit more about how the workflow is operated. So let me bring this over here and just show you. Karen, can you just let me know that you guys can see that?
I can see it.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the workflow diagram for our complaints process, which we're going to be looking at in Qualtrics. And so you can see that it's a rather complicated workflow with a lot of steps, which is something that Karen alluded to earlier. I would guess that your workflow is probably not this complicated. ANAB has an obligation to take complaints not only about our own organization, but about our customer organizations. And so our workflows become a little bit more complicated. So, but one thing I do want to point out here is where we have steps where this workflow is launching our corrective action workflow here, and that feeds into our decisions and actions taken and gets communicated back to the complainant. So I just wanted to show that, that diagram and show you some of the planning part of the process that goes into the workflow development before we really even get to designing the workflow. So without further ado, this is the beginning step of the complaints process workflow. In this step of our workflow, this is the inside of our Qualtrics system, and I have kind of set up a test workflow so that we don't have to switch back and forth between all of the users that are actually involved in this workflow. But I will just emphasize the point that Karen made earlier, which is that the workflow really helps to govern processes when there's multiple people involved. And particularly for an organization like ours, where we don't only have multiple people involved, but we have multiple people involved and they are not geographically in the same location, it really helps to keep all of our records in one place and give us a centralized location to store those records and an easy way to pass work from one person in the workflow to the next person in the workflow. So the current step here is just the initiation of our complaints workflow. And you'll see here that we're just entering some information about the complaint here. And I've already gone ahead and pre-populated these fields so that you don't have to wait for me to do that. But one thing that I do want to point out is we have some fields in here that, that really do help us to govern our conformance with some requirements. For example, does the complainant wish to keep their conflict information confidential? This is a requirement that we have in our ISO requirements, that if the complainant wishes to keep their information confidential, we are required to respect that request. Some of you, this is not as applicable for. I think it really is in all the ISO standards. It's just that most laboratories receive complaints about themselves, and so the complainant is automatically known to you. But this is one of our requirements, and having this field here and visible throughout the workflow and reminding our own staff of it as they participate in the investigation is one way that we help to ensure that we are conforming with that requirement. So you'll see here that we have some fields for which part of ANAB the complaint is about and what type of entity the complaint is against. We're going to talk today about a complaint that is made about ANAB. And so I've filled that in. And again, the name of the organization then is ANAB. And then we do always ask that if someone is going to complain or file a complaint about one of our accredited entities or one of our organizations that's certified by an accredited entity, that they do try to lodge that complaint directly with the organization first and reach a resolution before bringing the complaint to us. So that's a question that we ask on our complaint form. And so this is not applicable to this complaint. And then a summary of the response, which is also not applicable. So here's a description of the complaint that I filled in. It's a fake complaint, although I have heard it before. You can also choose to upload supporting documentation if there's any submitted with the complaint. And then there's a section for our staff to keep kind of a running conversation log or record of our comments about this investigation so that we can all see where it is. So this complaint was just entered as it was received, and I've shown an example of here of how we can upload the original complaint form so that it's attached here and that you can view it. So I'm going to go ahead and say this complaint entry is complete, and that brings us to the next screen, which is that once the complaint is entered, usually by our administrative staff, someone has to evaluate this complaint and decide who it's going to get assigned to. So you can see all of those fields here that we filled in are still visible, but many of them cannot be edited at this point. And so I'm going to go ahead and assign this test user as the person who has to be responsible for the initial evaluation of this complaint. And then I'm going to push this button to assign it to them. All right, so here's some instructions for them to evaluate the complaint. They can see all of the information that was submitted previously, and now they are responsible to make some initial evaluation of the complaint, which determines the direction that this workflow is going to take from here. So you can see there's a number of things that they can do. This is also another way that we try to keep ourselves in conformance with the requirements. One of the requirements is that the person who performs the decision and investigation of the complaint has to be independent of the subject of the complaint. So if for some reason that initial party who gets assigned to this complaint has a need to recuse themselves, we do allow for that option here. They can choose to recuse themselves, and then that will come back to it'll come back to me, frankly, to reassign it to someone else so that we don't have a conflict of interest in the person who's reviewing the complaint. I try to pay attention to that initially, but sometimes I don't know all the things that are going on, so I don't know whether that person is involved. And if that happened, I would just reassign it. So for purposes of today, we're going to choose this option for the demonstration to say that, yeah, this is a valid complaint and we want to initiate the ANAB corrective action process. In this particular instance, this field is not needed, but because the decision maker is a user later in the process, we need to designate a decision maker. So I'm going to go ahead and designate the same user as a decision maker. There isn't any reason why that person wouldn't be able to make the final decision regarding that complaint. So in this instance, it'll just be the same person. All right, so you can see that now my workflow screen has disappeared. And the reason for that is because what happened is that our corrective action workflow got launched because I said that a corrective action needed to be initiated. So what should happen, if we are lucky, is that the email system is working quickly and I would have gotten a complaint as a result. I would have gotten a notification as a quality manager that our corrective action and opportunity for improvement workflow had been launched as a result. So you can see then that this is what an example of that workflow would look like. It's not the particular one that we just launched, because I wanted to give you an example of the fields that would be filled in. Oh, here's the email. So this is the email notification that gets sent automatically by the corrective action and opportunity for improvement process when the corrective action workflow is launched. So if that initial evaluator of the complaint chooses this option, then I am sent this email that says, hey, this corrective action has been launched and it's the result of the complaint process. And here's the date, and this is the business unit, and this is the description of the complaint. And then I can go directly to the corrective action workflow that has been opened. So this is an example of that corrective action workflow, and then the fields that would be tied to it as it applies. So this one is the source. So you can see this is another example of how our processes are tied together, because our corrective actions can result from our internal audit process, our periodic review of our controlled documents, our management review, external evaluation, which is what they call it when we are assessed at ANAB as an accrediting body, appeal process, complaint process, our risk evaluation process, or another. So we can see that complaint process is selected here, and that it's not an external finding from an external evaluation, so I've just chosen not applicable. There's a place to indicate the clause of the requirements document, and then a description of the issue, which would come from the complaint if this was a result of the complaint. So then you can see that there's an option for us to choose the next action in the process, and an option to assign responsibility to carry out those corrective actions. This is a list of our whole staff. And then you can see that I can make some initial comments on my evaluation and the assignment that that person who has been assigned to evaluate it will be able to see. And then I can just submit it for review, and then it goes on its merry way in our complaints process. So in order to further our workflow in my inbox, we have to fill out these fields, because that complaints workflow is waiting on us to fill out these fields. So I'm just going to fill out some fake information in the interest of time, and we will sorry about that. It's going to make me go through the corrective action process all the way as the quality manager. So I would have to log out of Qualtrics, log in as the quality manager and not the test user, because you can see now I'm listed up above here, and fill this out. But I think you get the idea that the corrective action process has to be finished before our complaints process can work through. So I'm going to go do that on the other side. But in the meantime, I am going to show you a little bit about how, while this complaint is in its process of working through our system, I can generate reports in Qualtrics that will give me an idea where it is at any point in time. And so this is a really useful process. You can see this is in the report section of the Qualtrics product, and it is a summary of complaints, and we can run that report. And you can see this is my test workflow, so these are all fake instances. You can see forensics gets a lot of complaints. That's just a joke. I just chose them because I just picked them because they're first in the list. But you can see that I can see the date that the complaint was received and which business unit that complaint applies to, a brief description of the complaint, the result of the initial evaluation, so whether or not we initiated our corrective action process or whether the complaint was withdrawn, and the current step at which that workflow sits. So you can see how that process shakes out in terms of where it's at. And this is really useful to me as a quality manager because we do have staff spread out all over our country. And it is nice for me to be able to see where these workflows are at any given moment without having to call people on the phone or, you know, somehow actually get in touch with them in person across 2 different time zones or while they're out on an assessment, so that I can always know where things are and be keeping track of them. Another nice thing about the reporting option is that you can always have these reports generated automatically and sent to you in your email, say once a month or once a week or however frequently that you choose to have them submitted, and that will automatically arrive in your inbox box on a regular basis. All right, so I have logged in on my other screen here to complete this workflow process for the other complaint that we had. So I'll just show you how the corrective action process is going, where I have initiated the corrective action process. I'm now submitted it through the quality manager review phase. So the corrective action process has been launched. I'm assigned responsibility for doing the cause analysis and the development of the corrective action plan. And I've assigned some people to help that main person responsible. So some collaborators who are going to be part of their team, and I can make some comments to them if I want to, and I can submit them. So now you can see that they have the job to come up with the plan. They can put a summary in here of the analysis. They can put they can outline all of the action items that are results of this corrective action plan, and just going to fill these out really quick. And they can submit the action plan, and then they get to set a timeline for reviewing the effectiveness of the evaluation. So as most of you know, once we take corrective actions, we are required for our conformance to evaluate the effectiveness of those actions taken. But sometimes it's not really appropriate to evaluate them all in 2 weeks, right? It really depends on what the action is. So if the action is really going to take maybe 6 months to be able to tell whether it was effective, or a year to tell whether it's effective, we give the option to set the timeline for that effectiveness evaluation here. And then we can record these actions as completed, and we can have some. Now it's gone to the step where the effectiveness review is complete. I took all the waiting periods out of the workflow in order to demonstrate this to you guys today, because if I made you wait 30 days, we would have to come back, you know, next month and take a look. So I took all the waiting periods out. So this is as if that 1 month has already passed. We can deem those actions as effective. I can say it's too soon, and I can reset that effective date, or I can say that actions were not effective, and then I would need to launch another corrective action process. So we'll say the actions are deemed effective and that we reviewed objective evidence of implementation, and the actions are effective, and we're going to take it to a close. So, so you can see how that ends up happening. So I'm going to go log out again and go, and I'm going to be myself again to get this workflow kicked off. I think there might be still a waiting period in there because the steps are not happening. But what I can do is I can show you the end of one of these workflows that I have completed in this report. So you can see what I did was I just clicked on the number of a workflow in this report, and that will take me directly to that workflow if I am logged in. So this takes me, it says, this particular one says that it's waiting on the corrective action workflow to complete, which is the one I'm having trouble getting through. So we'll go back and look at a different instance that's already closed. So you can see in the history of this complaints process, it's been through the assignment of the complaint for evaluation. It has launched the corrective action workflow. The decision has been recorded on the complaint after the corrective action was completed, and the submission of the documentation of communication to the complainant has been completed, and then we did a submit and close of the complaint. So this is another example of how the workflow is helping to promote our conformance at ANAB. Part of the workflow is that we have to submit documentation of the complaint, of the complaint resolution being communicated to the complainant. This is a requirement of our ISO document, and so it's something that we are required to include. And so we made it a required field in the workflow so that there's no way we can be missing that documentation, because the workflow cannot proceed to the next step unless it's there. So the documentation of the final communication with the complainant, when the workflow is closed, you can see that there's an attachment here. And I just attached one of our controlled documents here as an example. But if in the instance that this was an actual communication to the complainant, it would be a letter or documentation of an email receipt to the complainant. At ANAB, we also choose to communicate with the respondent in a complaint. That's something that it really doesn't say that we have to, but if we receive a complaint about one of our accredited organizations and we are pursuing it, we feel it's important to communicate to them when that complaint has been resolved. So we also have a step in the workflow to document the communication with the respondent, the person who was complained about, if that's not us. And so we would upload that as well. But if you remember earlier, one of the things in the workflow that we did to help ourselves be in compliance was to designate whether the complainant wished to keep their name and contact information confidential. And because we have included that in the workflow, before we communicate with the respondent, there is a reminder in the workflow that that this person who made this complaint may have chosen to remain confidential, and that if you're communicating with the respondent, you should ensure that that information remains confidential from them. So that's one of the ways also that we help ourselves to remain in conformance. So, so you can see at the end of the workflow, all of the information that has been recorded throughout is kept as part of the workflow record, and that is accessible in the end through this reporting mechanism where you can get a report on all of your current workflows that are out there and the workflow ID numbers, which are accessible by clicking here. You can also take this report and export it in different formats, Excel or in a CSV, or you can print preview it in a kind of pretty PDF format, which is a nice format to be submitted to, say, an audit team or something of that nature. So, so there are several options with regard to the reporting options here. So with that, Karen, I think we've had a demonstration of kind of how the complaints process goes from the beginning to the end and how it is integrated with the corrective action process and what kind of records we can have in the reporting process. So I think we might be ready for me to stop sharing and send it back to you.
Sure, wonderful. And Rhonda, thank you so very much. I think it's really interesting to really see how you guys have been able to take Qualtrics and really configure it to fit your practices and things like that. And so it's really a great opportunity to share that. So thank you so very much for doing so. I'm going to take the screen back and we just have a couple more slides to go through and talk about. Give me 1 second. And Rhonda, can you see my screen?
Yes, I'm good, thanks.
All right. So just a reminder, please feel free to put those questions into the questions and area box. And as you're doing that, I just want to talk a little bit about the screen that I'm sharing right here. For our customers that are on, or even anybody else that maybe not be a customer, I do want to let you know that our registration for our user conference is now open and available for signups. We do a user conference every 18 months, and it is a great way for our customers to come together, network with each other, also learn from industry experts, also get some more hands-on training of the product. And so if you've never attended, it really is a great time and a really good learning opportunity and networking opportunity for you. And we have announced our theme this year. Every time we have a theme, and it's a superhero theme this year. So if it's something you're interested in, please, please, please reach out to us, and we'll be happy to give you some more information about that. I think now we're going to move to the questions and answers area. I see that some questions are coming in. If you have questions about Qualtrics, you want to get some more information, maybe learn about some of the other aspects of the product that we didn't really dive into today, please let us know. My name is Karen Arriviaga, like I mentioned earlier. This is my email address. Feel free to reach out to me, and our team will be able to reach out and really get the answers that you might need. I also want to share, if you can see my screen here, this is our website. We also do a 30-minute introductory webinar every other week. If you go to our website, click events and webinars, it'll take you to all of the events that we're regularly doing. And the 30-minute introductory webinar is a quick, easy way to see Qualtrics in 30 minutes and get a nice introduction to the product itself. So feel free to come here and register if you would like. All right, I see lots of questions coming in. Okay, let's see. What's the first one? All right. So the first question that we have coming in is about, Rhonda, can you talk a little bit about, are you guys using workflows with Qualtrics in any other capacity for ANAB?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, we are, you saw a little bit today of our complaints process workflow and our corrective action workflow. We also have some other workflows that we use related to our performance evaluation process. And we also have some workflows that we use related to making sure that information is shared among our teams. Say, for instance, if people go out to conferences and they make contacts with people from an organization at that conference, they would file a report from that conference so that everybody knows kind of what happened there and whether or not that conference was worthwhile for us and whether we should send more people next year. And so it's kind of a planning tool as well as a way of communicating with each other. So that's another workflow that we have. We also are transitioning to a workflow for our internal audit process. So a lot of workflows, yes.
Great. No, thank you. Thank you for that. Here's another question. Can a quote layperson configure a workflow, or does it take a programmer or a developer to do so?
I have programmed all of the workflows at ANAB, and I am a quality manager. So I started using the Qualtrics product about 3 years ago when I came to ANAB. And so I would say, as a relatively new person, it was, it's not something that everybody can do, I think, particularly if the workflows get complicated. If they're very linear, then it's quite easy. But if they're interrelated and launching other workflows, it becomes a little bit more challenging. I would say some training is required, but it's certainly something that you know, anyone could be trained to do, I think.
And I can even go on with that as well. And that's really why we have training. You know, one of the things that we do and we offer with the purchase of the software is a pretty detailed training experience that we have our customers go through. You know, we actually will bring you a product consultant that sometimes was even our customer before they started working with us, and they bring to you like best practices and even talk to you about what you're currently doing and how that's going to work in Qualtrics. And it comes down to workflow development. That's a lot of why we have those best-in-class workflows, is to kind of give you a jump start and to give you something to work and start from. Though there is a learning curve to it, though, once you have it, it is something that you will be able to do without having to reach out to us or without needing like C++ or programming type experience. That is some of the feedback that we have heard. If you're at any time, if you're ever interested in actually seeing what goes into developing workflows, if you're making decisions or just want to get an idea of what that looks like, we'd be happy to jump on a quick call with you to take you through that process, just to kind of give you an idea of what that process would look like. And so you can kind of go from there and determine if that's something that you would want to do or not. All right. Another question. Was the process map diagram output by Qualtrics? Great question. So Rhonda, how did you make your process map?
So process mapping is pretty routine in ANAB management system. So we have a long history of process mapping our processes when we are looking at making changes. So that particular process map that you saw today was designed in-house by us, but there is a mapping tool available in Qualtrics. I don't typically use it, so maybe Karen wants to talk a little bit more about it.
Sure. So we have, when you purchase Qualtrics, one of the features that you get with Qualtrics is our workflow designer. You know, up until the best-in-class workflows that we offer now with the product are actually pretty new to us. We've started offering those this year. Prior to this year, though, we used to give you, and in fact, we still give you the ability to create your own workflows. And so we give you a designer. It works very similar to Microsoft Visio, where you map out your process, you push it into Qualtrics. And then as you're developing the workflow itself, you're going step by step through the process, choosing different fields that you're asking about at each step, and then choosing the routes and who's going to be responsible for what in between those different steps. And so the designer is something that you'll get as a part of the process itself. And so that'll be what you make all of those diagrams out of. That is a part of the process.
The workflow map that you saw today was a Visio design, converted to a PDF format.
Great. Yeah, and even with the workflow designer that we have, one of the features that it allows you to do is take that diagram that you build and actually put it on the workflow within Qualtrics. And so as people are really working within the workflow, they have a visual representation of what the steps are around the step that they are participating in. And so again, if that's something that you would like to take a deeper dive into, or anybody on this call, we would be happy to show you that and what that looks like. All right. Here's another question. Are workflows configurable, and can those workflow configs be customized for different user groups? This might be a tag team question too, Rhonda. Do you want to go first? You want me to?
You can go first.
Okay. So 100% yes. You know, the power behind Qualtrics is yes, our workflows are extremely configurable. You know, we've seen everything from workflows that are 1 to 2 steps, and then we've seen workflows with hundreds of steps with different workflows being launched from each other. And so they're really configurable. A lot of times the biggest part of the work is really designing the process and figuring out what your routes are going to be before you really create the different fields and steps within Qualtrics itself. And so absolutely they can be customized. When it comes down to whether or not they can be customized for different user groups, the answer is yes there too. Qualtrics allows you to set up users in different role-based actions. By using these roles, you get to determine what these individuals and different types of users in your system get to interact with. So you might have a scenario where you have, let's say, a technician or an analyst that their only purpose in Qualtrics is looking at documents or taking tests and trainings, and where they wouldn't even be working with workflows. Or you might have some more advanced users of Qualtrics that are really going to be in the weeds with some of the workflows and managing some of these processes. And you can imagine the views of what people see in Qualtrics and what they can interact with those two examples are going to be significantly different. We have scenarios where we have customers that have multiple locations. And so they'll have a specific corrective action request for one location that differs from a corrective action request for another because some of the fields are going to be different. And so they will make sure that certain areas only see the corrective action request workflow that's applicable to them. And so absolutely, I hope that answers that question. And Rhonda, anything you wanted to add to that?
The only thing I think I can add is I think that you kind of saw an example of that today. This particular workflow is not customized to different work groups because the quality manager made them all agree on the same process, but it does allow us to choose work groups. So for example, when you saw me selecting that field that decided which business unit that this complaint belonged to, what I select in that field then determines the personnel list that I get to assign that to. So if I choose forensics, then when I'm choosing people to assign it to, I only see people who are in our forensics business unit. So that's one way that the workflows can sort of be customized for a work group as well. Even though the steps in the workflow are the same, it does allow me to make sure that they're getting assigned to people in the right group.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Great. All right, another question. When determining the effectiveness of a CA, if determined not to be effective, does the system automatically take it back to root cause, or is that a manual process?
Yeah, so right now, the step to launch the corrective action process again will occur if I push the step not to, if I chose that it was not effective, it would launch a corrective action process again.
Great, thank you. Yeah, when you're creating the workflows and looking at them, in fact, some of our best in class, you'll notice in the routing that they will continue to go through back and forth between a couple steps until it's going to be eventually finalized. So if it is written in the workflow of that if it is not effective, it has to go back, that is something that you could probably manage and create the workflow to do.
Yeah, that's the reason at that step of the workflow where there's really two choices. The choice that you make determines the route that the workflow goes.
Awesome. All right. Can the system be integrated with tools like CRMs and Salesforce to pull in client complaints? Is this a custom application? Do you want me to take that one, Rhonda?
Well, I can answer it because we've looked at it, and then you can just provide any additional information.
Perfect.
Qualtrics does have an open API that you can use with, say, HubSpot to integrate so that information will transfer from, say, a form on your website and kick off a Qualtrics workflow. Ours is not designed that way at this moment, but it is a possible option.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And things like this, when we start having questions like this, a lot of times what we'll do is jump on a call, try to really understand what your goal is. How are you collecting the information in Salesforce? How is that what is your overall plan on how you would want that information to go into Qualtrics? Like Rhonda mentioned, we have an open API, but we always like to understand the full scope of the project that you are looking to do. And so let's get on the phone. Let's kind of talk through it, and we can tell you how it can be done and what type of work is involved with that. All right, another question. Where does Qualtrics reside, online or on our server? I like this one. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Well, ANAB is a cloud customer. So Qualtrics resides in the ether for us, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are other options, which Karen, I think you'll be more qualified because my only experience is with the cloud option. I strongly prefer it because it means that when Qualtrics makes updates to their products, those are immediately available to us. I've also had several situations with the cloud option where I was struggling with a workflow or something didn't work the way that was supposed to, and I needed the help from the people at the Qualtrics Help Center to figure it out, and they were able to get right into our system with my permission and to help me figure out what the problem was. So from our perspective, it has been helpful to have the cloud option, but I know that that isn't really a possibility for some people.
Yeah, and absolutely. We do have both options. However, I will say, and kind of to talk what Rhonda is mentioning, about 90% of our newer customer base is going hosted in our cloud offering. I mean, we're doing all the IT heavy lifting for you. We, like Rhonda said, we do about 2 to 3 major releases of our product a year. Those automatically go into your instance of Qualtrics. There's really a lot of benefit in terms of just always being up to date with the product, but then also, like she said, being supported. Our support team is often able to get on your system and support you a lot easier that way as well. But we do work with some organizations, especially some government organizations that are just not ready to go to the hosted environment. And so we understand that and still offer a cloud, an on-premise solution as well. All right. Do emails that prompt people to take steps in Qualtrics have to be viewed from within Qualtrics, or do they go to your regular email account?
So those go to your regular email account. One of the things that we didn't cover during the workflow is that it's not only the initial email that goes to your regular account and reminds you, but you do have a task in your Qualtrics inbox. So if you don't see the email, but you happen to log into Qualtrics, because you're a good employee and that's where all your control documents are, you'll see that you have a task in your inbox. And then in addition to that, it is possible, and we do, configure reminders to the people who have been assigned tasks so that if they haven't been done within a certain period of time that we designate, that they will get a reminder email in their email inbox that they haven't completed their task yet. And you can also configure the email reminders to escalate so that if they get to a certain point of being overdue, that not only is the person who's responsible emailed, but their supervisor gets emailed as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And those emails get sent out based on timelines that you create for the different processes that are going out. And really what we hear from our customer base is that those emails and those reminders are really what help bring some of the time savings associated with Qualtrics. You know, they're going to be, for every task that you have, emails will be sent out continuously until that person finishes that task. And so you can imagine, instead of quality managers or lab managers or directors following up with people to get them to finish some of their tasks, Qualtrics really is going to take on that burden for you and bring on that savings. And guys, these questions are fantastic, so keep them coming. I know that we only have a few more minutes left, so we'll try to get to as many of them as we possibly can. Here's a good one. Can Qualtrics pull information from a LIMS as part of a workflow? Again, this is going to be an answer where it's like, sure, let's dive into exactly what you want to do and what information do you want to pull. We can have a conversation after this to kind of talk about that. We do integrate with some LIMS products already. Right now, there is a Justice Tracks integration that we have that some of our customers are using if you're on the forensic side that allow those two applications to talk to each other. So there are some, it is possible to do so. Again, we would just want to jump on a call with you and really evaluate what your overall goals of that integration would be to kind of talk about you know, what it would take to make that happen. All right. Here's another one. Is there a need to test Qualtrics updates at the unit level to ensure they do not disrupt the unit operation? Do you want me to answer that one, Rhonda?
Well, sure. I mean, we have never had a disruption as a result of a Qualtrics update, so I don't know that I can speak to it. But sometimes when there are features rolled out in a Qualtrics update, we don't implement those features immediately. We try them out and see how we want to go about implementing them and training our people to use them. So I wouldn't, I mean, I think that's kind of similar to what the question is, but I'll let you interpret the question too.
Absolutely. No, I think that was perfect, actually, and I'm glad that you actually explained that. You know, it really kind of depends on our customer. It depends on their accreditation. It depends how big they are as an organization. And there's a lot of determining factors in here. I think that we do have some, like Rhonda said, like, though they're getting the updates, they don't necessarily turn them on right away until they evaluate it to see if that's something that they want to implement for their organization. You know, that's an option that you would have. Then we also have some that as soon as the updates come out, they're pushing it out to everybody. So it really just depends on you and what you want to do. We also have some customers that are audited by the FDA. Who are under CFR Part 11, and they have to go through validations with their software. So we even have a package for them to make sure that we're giving them the information that they need to be able to validate that software. So it really just comes down to circumstance and what you guys want to do. But we do offer a lot of services around that. And if there is special circumstances that you want our assistance on, maybe you to really dive into some of the features or understand what those new features are better, let us know. We're always happy to jump on a call and explain what those are and things like that. All right. Do you manage the security of using the cloud, or is that on the individual companies? So the security on the cloud, we have some documents as to what the security is for our cloud deployments and what that includes. And so that's some information that if you would like it, I could share that with you. So I can reach out to you once this is over with more information about our cloud offering and what that entails in terms of security and everything like that. That is information. I believe that's also on our website. But I will get you some of that information and reach out to you once this is over to make sure that you have that. And last but not least, we always get this question. It's a good one. Is pricing user-based or something else? So Qualtrics is a subscription license-based product. And so the way that we really evaluate what your licensing structure is going to be is we usually have a call with you so we can understand exactly how many users you would have and how they would interact with the system. We have a couple of different licensing levels depending on how people use the system. You know, maybe they're somebody that just needs to view a document and take a test. Maybe there's somebody that's really going to be more of a power user and quality manager. So those licenses are going to be very different. And so if you would like pricing of Qualtrics, feel free to reach out to me at Karen@qualtrics.com or reach out to us on our website. We'd be happy to jump on a call with you, maybe even go through some of the other areas of the product so we can just discuss how people will interact with those portions of the product, and then we'd be happy to put a quote together for you. All right, and we are right at 4:01, and I don't see any additional questions coming in. And of course, if anything pops up, even once this webinar is over, or even like in an hour or so, or even in a month or so, or a year, we're always here to help. And so feel free to reach out to us at any time, and we'll be happy to get you answers to the questions that you might have about Qualtrics. Rhonda, thank you so very much for taking us through your system and showing us how ANAB is going to be using Qualtrics for customer complaints and corrective action requests. I think it was extremely helpful, and we're very grateful to you for giving us that opportunity to share this with everybody on the call today. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, we had a great group, lots of wonderful questions. We do webinars from time to time, so always be on the lookout for different options or opportunities to check out Qualtrics. And thank you all so very much, and we hope you have a great day.